Sarah Mitchell stood at the entrance of Camp Pendleton, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted her uniform for the 100th time that morning. The scars on her face caught the California sunlight, creating a map of raised tissue that told a story she wasn't ready to share. 3 jagged lines ran from her left temple down to her jaw, while smaller marks dotted her forehead like constellations of pain. She had dreamed of this moment for years, but now that it was here, doubt crept in like fog rolling off the Pacific. The other recruits around her looked so young, so perfect, so unmarked by life's cruelties. Sarah was 26, older than most, and carried visible reminders of a past that haunted her dreams. The bus ride to the base had been torture. She caught the stares, heard the whispered questions, felt the weight of curious eyes examining her disfigured face. One recruit, barely 18 with smooth skin and bright eyes, had asked innocently, "What happened to your face?" Sarah had simply turned toward the window and pretended to sleep. Walking through the gates now, she remembered the day everything changed. 2 years ago, she had been working as a volunteer firefighter in her small Colorado town. The warehouse fire had seemed routine until the roof collapsed, trapping 3 children in the basement. Without hesitation, Sarah had crawled through burning debris, her protective gear torn away by falling beams. She managed to save all 3 children, pushing them through a window to safety just as another section of ceiling came crashing down. The doctors said she was lucky to be alive. Degree burns covered 30% of her body, with the worst damage to her face and arms. Months of surgeries followed, skin grafts and reconstructive procedures that helped but couldn't erase the evidence of that terrible day. The children's parents called her a hero. The town gave her a medal, but Sarah only saw a monster when she looked in the mirror. During her long recovery, she had watched military documentaries and read stories of Marines who overcame impossible odds. Their courage inspired her, gave her a new dream when her old life seemed impossible to reclaim. She wanted to serve, to prove that her scars didn't define her worth, that she could still make a difference in the world. The recruitment office had been skeptical. The medical examinations were extensive, the psychological evaluations even more so. But Sarah's determination and the fact that her injuries didn't impair her physical capabilities eventually won them over. She passed every test, exceeded every expectation, and earned her place in this recruit class. Now, surrounded by other hopeful Marines, she felt the familiar sting of judgment. A group of recruits near the barracks were talking in low voices, occasionally glancing in her direction. One of them, a tall boy with perfect teeth and an arrogant smile, made no effort to hide his disgust. "Did you see that girl's face?" he said loudly enough for Sarah to hear. "Looks like she went through a meat grinder. What's she even doing here?" His friends laughed nervously, unsure whether to join in or distance themselves from his cruelty. Another recruit, this one with broad shoulders and a thick southern accent, chimed in. "Maybe she's trying to scare the enemy to death. Won't need weapons with a face like that." The laughter grew louder, more confident. Other recruits began to gather, drawn by the commotion. Sarah felt her cheeks burn with shame and anger, but she kept walking, her head held high despite the tears threatening to fall. She had faced worse than teenage bullies. She had faced fire and death and pain beyond imagination. But their words still cut deep. As the day progressed, the cruelty only intensified. During the initial briefings, she caught recruits making faces behind her back, mimicking exaggerated expressions of horror. In the mess hall, whispered conversations stopped when she approached, only to resume with renewed vigor once she passed. The boy with perfect teeth, who she learned was named Derek, seemed to make it his personal mission to torment her. "Hey, Frankenstein," he called out as she carried her lunch tray. "Did you forget your mask at home?" The cafeteria erupted in laughter. Sarah's hands shook as she set down her tray, the sound of metal hitting plastic echoing in the sudden silence that followed. Every eye in the room was on her, waiting to see how she would react. Some faces showed sympathy, others curiosity, but most displayed the cruel amusement of youth watching someone else's humiliation. Sarah took a deep breath and sat down alone at an empty table. She ate her meal in silence, each bite tasting like ash, while the conversation around her gradually resumed. She could still hear Derek's voice carrying across the room, emboldened by the attention his cruelty had earned him. That night in the barracks, the harassment continued. Someone had drawn a crude picture on her bunk, a stick figure with an exaggerated scarred face. The word monster was scrawled underneath in thick black marker. Sarah stared at the drawing for a long moment, then quietly tore it down and threw it away. She said nothing to the drill sergeant, made no complaints, filed no reports. She had not come here to be protected. She had come here to prove herself. The other recruits watched her response with interest. Some seemed disappointed that she hadn't reacted more dramatically, while others appeared impressed by her composure. But Derek and his growing group of followers weren't satisfied with her silence. They saw it as weakness, an invitation to push harder. Over the next few days, the psychological warfare escalated. Sarah found insects in her gear, sand in her boots, and offensive notes tucked into her belongings. During physical training, she was accidentally tripped, pushed, and isolated from group exercises. The drill sergeant seemed oblivious to the systematic harassment, focused on the official training regimen rather than the social dynamics developing among the recruits. But Sarah endured it all. Every morning she rose before dawn, prepared her gear with meticulous care, and faced whatever cruelty awaited her. She excelled in every physical challenge, scored high on written exams, and demonstrated leadership skills that impressed even the most skeptical instructors. Her performance was flawless, but her tormentors refused to acknowledge her achievements. "Bet she's used to pain," Derek sneered after Sarah completed an obstacle course faster than anyone else in their platoon. "Face like that, she probably doesn't feel anything anymore." The other recruits laughed dutifully, but Sarah noticed that some of the laughter seemed forced now. A few recruits had begun to distance themselves from Derek's group, uncomfortable with the relentless targeting of someone who had done nothing to deserve their hatred. But the core group of bullies remained committed to making her life miserable. One evening, as Sarah cleaned her rifle in the barracks, a recruit named Martinez sat down beside her. He was a quiet young man from Texas who rarely spoke unless spoken to. His presence surprised her, as most recruits had learned to avoid her to escape Derek's attention. "You don't deserve this," Martinez said quietly, not looking at her directly. "What they're doing, it's wrong." Sarah continued cleaning her weapon, not trusting herself to speak. It was the first kind word anyone had spoken to her since arriving at camp, and the unexpected compassion threatened to break down the walls she had built around her emotions. "They're scared," Martinez continued. "Scared that someone who looks different might be better than them, and you are better than them. Everyone can see it, even if they won't admit it." He stood to leave, then paused. "My little sister was burned in a car accident. She's got scars, too. When I see you, I think about how brave she is every day just getting up and facing the world. You've got that same courage." With that, he walked away, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts and her rifle. For the first time since arriving at camp, she allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, she belonged here after all. But Derek and his followers weren't finished with her yet. They had bigger plans, crueler schemes designed to break her spirit once and for all. What they didn't know was that Sarah Mitchell had already survived the worst thing that could happen to her. She had walked through fire to save innocent lives, endured months of agony to rebuild herself, and found the strength to pursue an impossible dream. Their words and pranks were nothing compared to the flames that had already tested her soul. And unknown to any of them, there were eyes watching from above, evaluating not just physical performance but character, courage, and the indefinable quality that separated true Marines from those who merely wore the uniform. The real test was just beginning, and Sarah Mitchell was ready for whatever came next. Her scars were not marks of weakness but proof of her strength, evidence of a spirit that refused to be broken no matter how hot the fire or how deep the pain. She would show them all what a real Marine looked like, scars and all. The third week of basic training brought new challenges and intensified pressure. Sarah had established herself as one of the top performers in almost every category, but the harassment from Derek and his followers had grown more sophisticated and vicious. They had recruited other recruits through a combination of peer pressure and fear, creating a toxic atmosphere that followed Sarah everywhere she went. During hand-to-hand combat training, Derek deliberately paired himself with Sarah whenever possible. He used the exercises as opportunities to inflict unnecessary pain, twisting her arm harder than required or, accidentally, striking her scarred face during sparring sessions. The instructors praised his aggression, unaware of his true motivations. "Come on, monster," Derek whispered during one particularly brutal grappling session. "Show us what you're made of. Oh, wait, we can already see that." Sarah absorbed the punishment without complaint, using her pain tolerance and superior technique to counter his attempts at humiliation. Every time he tried to embarrass her, she responded with flawless execution of the moves they had been taught. Her composure only seemed to fuel his anger. The psychological warfare extended beyond physical training. Derek had convinced several recruits to join his campaign of systematic exclusion and ridicule. They would fall silent when she approached, turn their backs when she tried to participate in conversations, and laugh at inside jokes designed to make her feel like an outsider. Mealtimes became exercises in isolation, with tables emptying whenever she sat down. But Sarah's performance continued to excel despite the social ostracism. During firearms training, she consistently scored in the top percentile, her steady hands and focused mind making her a natural marksman. In academic sessions, she answered questions with precision and insight that impressed even the most demanding instructors. Her physical fitness scores were among the highest in the company, her determination driving her to push beyond normal limits. The disparity between her achievements and her treatment began to create cracks in Derek's coalition. Some recruits privately questioned whether targeting someone so accomplished was right, but fear of becoming Derek's next victim kept them in line. Others began to admire Sarah's resilience, though they dared not express it openly. Martinez continued to offer quiet support when he could, sometimes sitting near her during lectures or nodding acknowledgement when their eyes met. A few other recruits had begun to follow his example, offering small gestures of humanity that helped sustain Sarah through the darkest moments. One morning during inspection, Drill Sergeant Rodriguez noticed the exceptional condition of Sarah's equipment and living space. Her gear was spotless, her bunk perfectly made, every detail attended to with military precision. He held her up as an example to the rest of the platoon, praising her attention to detail and discipline. "This is what right looks like," Rodriguez barked, gesturing at Sarah's immaculate area. "Mitchell here understands what it means to be a Marine. The rest of you could learn something from her dedication." The praise should have felt good, but Sarah knew it would only make her situation worse. Sure enough, that afternoon Derek cornered her behind the barracks with 3 of his closest followers. "Think you're special, don't you?" Derek snarled, his perfect face twisted with ugly anger. "Teacher's pet with her pretty scars. Well, let me tell you something, freak. You don't belong here. You'll never belong here. You're a circus attraction, not a Marine." One of his followers, a stocky recruit named Williams, stepped closer. "Maybe we should give her some new scars to match the old ones, help her complete the look." Sarah stood perfectly still, her hands at her sides, her expression calm despite the racing of her heart. She had faced worse than these boys, much worse. The flames that had marked her face had also forged something unbreakable inside her soul. "You finished?" she asked quietly. Derek's face flushed red with rage. He wasn't used to his victims showing such composure, such complete lack of fear. It made him feel powerless, small, ordinary, everything he was trying not to be. "We're just getting started," he hissed. But before he could elaborate on his threats, footsteps approached from around the corner. The group quickly dispersed, leaving Sarah standing alone as Drill Sergeant Rodriguez appeared with a clipboard in his hand. "Mitchell," he said, studying her face for any sign of what had just transpired. "Everything all right here?" "Yes, sir," Sarah replied without hesitation. "Just getting some air before evening chow." Rodriguez nodded, but his eyes lingered on her face. 20 years in the Marine Corps had given him an instinct for reading people and situations. He had noticed the social dynamics developing in his platoon, the way certain recruits seemed to orbit around others like planets around a star. He had also noticed Sarah's exceptional performance and unwavering composure under what he suspected was considerable pressure. "Walk with me, Mitchell," he said. They strolled through the base in comfortable silence, Rodriguez occasionally pointing out features of the facility or sharing brief stories about Marine history. Finally, he stopped near the memorial wall where the names of fallen Marines were inscribed in black marble. "You see these names?" Rodriguez asked. "Each one represents someone who faced impossible odds and chose to serve anyway, someone who looked at danger and decided that protecting others was more important than protecting themselves." Sarah nodded, not trusting herself to speak. "I've been watching you, Mitchell, watching how you handle pressure, how you respond to challenges, how you treat others even when they don't return the favor. You've got something special, something that can't be taught or trained or manufactured. You've got the warrior spirit." He turned to face her directly. "I don't know what brought you to us or what you've been through before this, but I know quality when I see it. And you, recruit, are going to make one hell of a Marine. The unexpected praise brought tears to Sarah's eyes, but she blinked them back quickly. Rodriguez pretended not to notice, giving her a moment to compose herself. Now I want you to know that my door is always open if you need anything. Anything at all, you understand? Yes, sir, Sarah managed to say. Good, now get to chow before all the good stuff is gone. As Rodriguez walked away, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced since arriving at boot camp: hope. Not just for survival, but for success, for acceptance, for the chance to prove that her scars were not barriers but badges of honor. That evening in the mess hall, she noticed a subtle shift in the atmosphere. Martinez sat across from her instead of at a safe distance. Two other recruits, Jensen and Park, joined them with their trays. They didn't make a big production of it, didn't announce their rebellion against Derek's social order, but their presence spoke volumes. Derek noticed immediately, his jaw clenching with barely controlled fury as he watched his carefully constructed isolation campaign begin to crumble. But he couldn't call out the defectors without revealing the organized nature of his harassment, which would bring unwanted attention from the drill sergeants. Instead, he plotted something bigger, something that would expose Sarah's weakness once and for all, something that would prove she was just a broken girl hiding behind a Marine uniform. He convinced himself that he was protecting the Corps from someone who didn't belong, someone whose presence weakened the sacred brotherhood he was trying to join. What Derek didn't understand was that Sarah's scars represented the very qualities the Marine Corps valued most: courage under fire, sacrifice for others, and the ability to endure unimaginable hardship without breaking. Her face told a story of heroism that his unmarked features never could. The fourth week of training brought urban combat exercises, where recruits learned to navigate hostile environments and make split-second decisions under pressure. Sarah excelled in these scenarios, her experience with real danger giving her an advantage over recruits who had never faced genuine life-or-death situations. During one particularly complex exercise, her team was pinned down by simulated enemy fire. While other recruits panicked or froze, Sarah calmly assessed the situation, identified an alternative route, and led her squad to safety. Her performance was so impressive that the instructors stopped the exercise to use it as a teaching moment. "This is leadership," announced Captain Morrison, the senior training officer who rarely involved himself in day-to-day exercises. Mitchell here didn't just follow orders or react to circumstances. She evaluated, adapted, and acted. She turned a potential disaster into a victory. The praise echoed across the training ground, reaching not just her immediate squad but the entire company. For the first time since arriving at boot camp, Sarah saw something other than disgust or pity in the faces around her. She saw respect. But she also saw Derek's face, twisted with a hatred so pure and venomous that it made her blood run cold. She realized that her success hadn't discouraged his campaign against her. It had made her an even bigger target. He wouldn't stop until he had destroyed her completely, no matter what it cost him or anyone else. That night, as she lay in her bunk listening to the quiet sounds of sleeping recruits, Sarah steeled herself for whatever was coming. Derek was planning something terrible. She could feel it in the way he looked at her, the way his followers whispered among themselves when they thought no one was listening. But Sarah Mitchell had walked through fire before. She had faced the worst that life could throw at her and emerged stronger on the other side. Whatever Derek had planned, she would be ready. Her scars were proof that she could survive anything, overcome any obstacle, endure any pain. The real test was coming, and she would meet it with the same courage that had driven her into that burning building 2 years ago. The same courage that had brought her here, to this place where she belonged, scars and all. The final week of basic training arrived with an unexpected announcement. General Patricia Hayes, the first female commandant of the Marine Corps, would be visiting to observe the graduation ceremony and present special recognition to outstanding recruits. The news electrified the base, as such high-level visits were extremely rare. Derek saw this as his ultimate opportunity to humiliate Sarah in front of the highest-ranking officer in the Corps. He spent days planning what he believed would be his masterpiece of cruelty, recruiting additional followers through promises and threats, building toward a moment that would destroy Sarah's Marine career before it even began. Meanwhile, Sarah focused on the final challenges ahead. The culminating exercise was a comprehensive test of everything they had learned, combining physical endurance, tactical knowledge, leadership skills, and mental resilience. Teams would be pushed to their absolute limits over a grueling 48-hour period that simulated real combat conditions. Sarah had been selected as a squad leader, recognition of her consistent excellence throughout training. Her team included Martinez, Jensen, Park, and ironically, two of Derek's former followers who had grown tired of his toxic leadership. Derek commanded a competing squad, determined to prove his superiority when it mattered most. The exercise began before dawn with a forced march through difficult terrain. Sarah set a steady pace that challenged her team without breaking them, regularly checking on each member's condition and adjusting their route to avoid unnecessary obstacles. Derek, meanwhile, drove his squad relentlessly, viewing any sign of fatigue as weakness to be crushed rather than managed. By noon, Derek's squad was already showing signs of strain. Two members were struggling with dehydration, and morale was low due to his constant berating and impossible demands. Sarah's team, despite the challenging pace, remained cohesive and focused, their confidence growing with each successfully completed objective. The contrast became even more apparent during the tactical scenarios. Sarah's squad moved like a well-oiled machine, each member understanding their role and trusting their leader's decisions. They completed their missions efficiently and safely, adapting to changing circumstances with the flexibility Sarah had instilled in them. Derek's squad, by contrast, struggled with coordination and communication. His authoritarian style had created followers rather than teammates, leaving them unprepared to think independently when situations demanded quick adaptation. Their performance deteriorated throughout the day, while Sarah's team continued to excel. As the sun set on the first day, the instructors gathered to review the squad's progress. Captain Morrison watched the video footage of both teams in action, making notes on a clipboard that would influence final evaluations. "Mitchell's team is operating at near-professional level," he commented to Drill Sergeant Rodriguez. "She's got natural leadership instincts that you can't teach. Look at how she positions herself during contact drills, always where she can see the whole battlefield but close enough to support any team member who needs help." Rodriguez nodded, comparing the footage to Derek's performance. "Thompson's team is falling apart. He's trying to control everything instead of leading. His people don't trust each other because they're too busy trying not to disappoint him." "Mitchell's been through something before this," Morrison observed. "You can see it in how she handles stress. She's not learning leadership here, she's applying lessons learned somewhere else, somewhere that mattered." The second day brought even greater challenges. Teams had to navigate through a simulated urban environment while under constant pressure from opposing forces played by advanced instructors. Radio communications were limited, supplies were scarce, and split-second decisions could mean the difference between success and failure. Sarah's squad entered the urban maze with a clear plan and multiple contingencies. She had spent the brief rest period the night before gathering intelligence from other teams who had already completed portions of the course, building a mental map of likely challenges and opportunities. Derek's team stumbled into the exercise with no clear strategy beyond his determination to outperform Sarah at any cost. His obsession with defeating her had consumed his focus, leaving little attention for the actual objectives they were supposed to achieve. The first major test came when both squads encountered a simulated civilian evacuation scenario. Injured role players were scattered throughout a building complex, and teams had to locate and extract them while under simulated enemy fire. Points would be awarded for successful evacuations, but deducted for casualties caused by careless or rushed actions. Sarah immediately recognized the scenario's similarity to her own experience in the Colorado warehouse fire. The familiar surge of adrenaline and clarity that had driven her that day returned now, sharpening her focus and calming her nerves. She split her team into pairs, assigned specific search zones, and established rally points where evacuees could be safely gathered before final extraction. Her methodical approach proved devastatingly effective. Within 20 minutes, her team had located all the civilians in their sector and established a secure evacuation route. The role players, many of them experienced Marines themselves, were impressed by the calm professionalism and genuine care Sarah's team displayed during the exercise. Derek's approach was far more chaotic. Frustrated by early setbacks and consumed with thoughts of Sarah's success, he pushed his team to move faster and take greater risks. When one of his squad members suggested a more cautious approach to clearing a particularly dangerous area, Derek snapped. "We're not here to play it safe," he shouted, his voice carrying across the exercise area. "We're Marines, not social workers. Mitchell's team is getting ahead of us because they're treating this like some kind of rescue operation instead of a military exercise." His outburst was heard not only by his own team, but by the observing instructors, who noted the breakdown in discipline and tactical thinking. Derek had revealed the personal nature of his motivation, confirming what many had suspected about his treatment of Sarah throughout training. As the exercise continued, the gap between the two squads' performance widened dramatically. Sarah's team completed objective after objective with precision and teamwork, while Derek's squad struggled with basic coordination and growing internal conflict. The breaking point came during a night navigation exercise. Teams had to move through dense terrain using only compass bearings and terrain features, reaching specific checkpoints within strict time limits. Sarah's team moved confidently through the darkness, their trust in each other and their leader evident in every coordinated movement. Derek's squad, meanwhile, became lost within the first hour. Frustrated and desperate, Derek began making increasingly poor decisions, leading his team in circles while refusing to admit his navigation errors. When Martinez, who had been temporarily assigned to Derek's squad for the exercise, politely suggested they recalibrate their position, Derek exploded. "Who made you the expert?" Derek snarled. "You're just another one of that freak's admirers. Maybe you should go join her squad where you belong." The comment was overheard by Staff Sergeant Williams, a senior instructor who had been shadowing the squads to evaluate their performance under stress. Williams stepped out of the shadows, his face grim in the moonlight. "Thompson," Williams said quietly, his voice carrying absolute authority. "You're relieved of command. Martinez, take over this squad and get them to the checkpoint. Thompson, you're coming with me." Derek's face went white as he realized the magnitude of his mistake. Calling Sarah a freak in front of a senior instructor, revealing his personal animosity during a military exercise, and demonstrating complete failure of leadership had destroyed any chance of graduating with honors. Worse, it had exposed him as exactly the kind of person the Marine Corps worked to eliminate from its ranks. As Derek was marched away, Sarah's squad reached their final checkpoint ahead of schedule. The exercise concluded with her team being used as the example of how the scenarios should have been executed. Captain Morrison himself conducted their debrief, praising not just their tactical performance but their cohesion and mutual support. "This is what Marine Corps leadership looks like," Morrison announced to the assembled recruits. "Not just technical competence, but the ability to bring out the best in others, the willingness to sacrifice personal glory for team success, the courage to do what's right even when it's difficult." His words echoed across the training ground as Sarah stood with her squad, their faces glowing with pride and exhaustion. She had proven herself not through spite or anger, but through the same courage and selflessness that had driven her into that burning building 2 years earlier. The morning of graduation brought crisp air and perfect sunshine. Families gathered in the stands to watch their loved ones officially become Marines, their faces beaming with pride and excitement. Sarah stood in formation with the rest of her company, her dress blue uniform immaculate, her bearing proud and confident. She had no family present, no loved ones to share this moment with her. The fire had taken more than just her appearance. It had cost her the relationship with her fiancé, who couldn't handle her changed appearance, and created distance from friends who didn't know how to act around her anymore. But she wasn't alone. Martinez, Jensen, Park, and the other recruits who had come to respect her stood nearby, part of the family she had found in the Corps. General Hayes took the podium as the ceremony began, her presence commanding instant attention from every person present. She spoke about honor, courage, and commitment, the core values that defined every Marine regardless of background or circumstance. "Today you become part of something larger than yourselves," Hayes declared. "You join a brotherhood and sisterhood that spans generations, connected by shared sacrifice and unwavering dedication to protecting those who cannot protect themselves. You have proven that you possess the warrior spirit, the mental toughness, and the moral courage to bear the title of United States Marine." The crowd erupted in applause as the new Marines stood at attention, their faces glowing with pride and achievement. But General Hayes wasn't finished. She had one more announcement that would change everything. Each graduating class produces Marines who exemplify the very best of our core values. Today, I have the honor of recognizing one recruit whose performance has been truly exceptional. This individual demonstrated not just technical competence, but the kind of moral courage and selfless leadership that defines the Marine Corps at its finest. Sarah's heart pounded as the general's eyes swept across the formation. She had performed well, but so had many others. She never imagined that her scarred face and difficult journey would be worthy of special recognition. "Recruit Sarah Mitchell, front and center," General Hayes commanded. The words hit Sarah like a thunderbolt. For a moment she couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't process what was happening. Then training took over, and she marched forward with crisp precision, coming to attention directly in front of the most powerful person in the Marine Corps. Throughout her training, Recruit Mitchell has demonstrated the warrior spirit under circumstances that would have broken lesser individuals. She has shown that true strength comes not from physical perfection, but from an unbreakable will and an unwavering commitment to others. Her scars are not marks of weakness, but proof of courage in action. The general's voice carried across the parade ground, reaching every corner of the assembled crowd. Sarah stood perfectly still, her face composed despite the emotions churning inside her chest. These scars were earned saving the lives of 3 children trapped in a burning building. Recruit Mitchell risked everything, sacrificed her own safety and appearance to ensure that others could live. That is the Marine Corps spirit in its purest form. A murmur ran through the crowd as the full story was revealed. Sarah's fellow recruits, many learning the truth for the first time, stared at her with new understanding and respect. The scars they had mocked were actually badges of honor, proof of exactly the kind of courage the Marine Corps sought in its members. For exceptional leadership, moral courage, and embodiment of Marine Corps values, I hereby award Recruit Mitchell the Honor Graduate designation for her class. General Hayes stepped forward and pinned a special ribbon to Sarah's uniform, then stepped back and rendered a perfect military salute. The gesture was unprecedented, the Commandant of the Marine Corps saluting a new recruit, and it sent a clear message about the value the Corps placed on character over appearance. Sarah returned the salute with tears streaming down her scarred face, no longer caring who saw her emotion. The applause from the crowd was deafening, but she barely heard it over the sound of her own heartbeat and the voice in her head that finally, after 2 years of doubt and pain, whispered the words she had longed to hear. "You belong here." As the ceremony concluded, and families rushed to embrace their new Marines, Sarah stood for a moment savoring the achievement. Derek was nowhere to be seen, having been quietly discharged the day before for conduct unbecoming. His cruelty had revealed his true character and disqualified him from wearing the uniform he had wanted so desperately. Martinez was the first to reach her, his face split by an enormous grin. "I told you that you had courage," he said, embracing her tightly, "but I had no idea just how much." Others followed, Jensen, Park, even recruits who had barely spoken to her during training, but who now understood what they had witnessed. Each handshake and congratulation was a small vindication, proof that her decision to pursue this dream had been right all along. General Hayes approached as the crowd began to thin, her expression warm but serious. "Mitchell, walk with me for a moment." They strolled across the parade ground, the general's aide maintaining a respectful distance as they talked privately. "I want you to know that your story has already spread throughout the Corps," Hayes said. "You've become an inspiration to Marines who face their own challenges, their own doubts about whether they belong. Your courage has given others permission to be brave." Sarah struggled to find words adequate to express her gratitude, but the general continued. "I also want you to know that this is just the beginning. The Marine Corps has plans for Marines like you, leaders who understand that strength comes from overcoming adversity rather than avoiding it. Your career is going to be remarkable, I can promise you that." As they reached the edge of the parade ground, General Hayes stopped and faced Sarah directly. "One last thing. Those scars don't define you, but they are part of your story. Don't ever let anyone make you feel ashamed of the price you paid for doing what was right. Those marks are proof that you were willing to sacrifice everything for others. That's what makes a Marine." The general saluted her once more, then walked away, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts and her pride. She looked back at the parade ground where her fellow Marines were celebrating with their families, then up at the flag snapping in the breeze above the base. She had found her home, her purpose, her family. The scars that had once made her feel like a monster now marked her as a hero. The pain that had nearly destroyed her had instead forged her into something stronger than she ever imagined possible. Sarah Mitchell was a United States Marine, and she wore her scars with pride.